this has been something that's been going on and intensifying over the last 2 years with the trade dispute between the United States and China. I think what we are seeing here is a response to the rise of China in terms of its positioning in the world, especially in trade. We see this China also as a threat to U.S. global dominance in global trade, and so what you see is a competition as opposed to a cooperation that is developing. So the impact of this will be that we would see more and more barriers that are going to be built up, and we'll see more and more difficulty in terms of trade and access to market. Yeah. I mean, one of the first acts when Trump got into his new role as president was to take the U.S. out of the TPP trade agreement, which is a multilateral trade agreement, making more access-free trading between multiple countries. And this is the beginning of what we are seeing today, in which we see more and more unilateral moves and more defensive moves starting in the West, and then the tendency to put the blame, if you will, of domestic economic challenges on the current global trade structure as it is today. The prevailing view of U.S. politicians is that the current trade system is unfair, and therefore these new rules need to be adjusted. In this sort of building up of trade barriers between countries, one of the early developments may be that countries will now start to take sides. So there will be East-West blocs, trade blocs. For instance, the new NAFTA trade is an example of a trading bloc between the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So you see that trade bloc, and then China with very actively pursuing a Belt and Road initiative. So there is that trade bloc being built up as well. So the challenge now is for all the adjacent countries and economies to have to now pick a side on which one of these two huge global trade blocs that they want to be part of. Yeah. Reshoring has always seemed to be a good idea for people to pursue, especially as trading blocs are developing. But there are several inherent difficulties with the complex global supply chains that we live with. The first is reshoring of what? A focus on the reshoring of tier 1 suppliers. That is the final assembly plant, the final manufacturer of the materials. But then what they're discovering is that the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers are much more difficult to reshore. So take, for example, the PPE situation earlier in the year. So there is this great drive to move face mask manufacturing back to the United States. But then the melt-blown PP material, which is the raw material to make the face mask in the first place, those are much harder than the melt-blown manufacturing facilities, which are huge manufacturing factories that are with expensive and complicated pieces of equipment, and those are quite capital intensive to set up. Those will be difficult to reshore. And then once you say, okay, we're going to reshore those, then you have to secure the polypropylene raw material for production. And we find a lot of that processing also is taking place overseas. Reshoring only makes sense when the entire supply chain is reshored. One of the strategic advantages of the Chinese supply chain is that it has the entire ecosystem in one place. So take, for example, a product like toys, plastic toys. Most of that exists in the Great Bay Area in China. That's where the plastic manufacturers are, that's where the paint manufacturers are, that's where the mold manufacturers are for those plastic toys. And that's why toys continue to be made there, even though labor prices have gone up and we have all these barriers. So one challenge is the whole physical structure of the supply chain. The other is there are certain resources and materials that are very difficult to onshore, reshore, unless we're able to convince consumers to lower their standard of living. All of us are used to these global supplies that show up in our everyday living. We expect tropical fruits for breakfast. We expect to have flowers that are grown in the Scandinavian countries in our homes. We expect apparel to be cheaply made and regularly available that are made in very far away countries. And then we expect our cell phones and our computers, which have components and various engineered parts that are designed in the U.S., fabricated in Korea or Malaysia and China, and then assembled somewhere else. So all those point to these very complicated supply chains that make modern living possible. And so while some more simple supply chains can be reshored rapidly, there are certain supply chains which are very, very heavy. They are immobile and they are very hard to move, or they are very capital intensive. So these are challenges which we have to deal with, and so I don't think there's been a lot of serious consideration about how you can move these entire ecosystems and supply chains back to the United States. And don't forget also that the reason why these supply chains moved offshore in the first place was because it is much cheaper to manufacture them overseas. So are consumers willing to pay the surcharge and the upcharge for an onshore or a reshored supply chain? Apparel supply chains are unique in many ways. Today still, apparel is a labor-intensive production process. And secondly, it upstream from the final assembly of apparel, it requires a lot of energy-intensive and resource-intensive processes. To dye material, you need a lot of water, and so you need a lot of treatment of wastewater on the back end. We need a lot of energy, and we need a lot of specialized machinery. Manufacturing of apparel requires skilled workers to work these machines in a very precise manner. So all of these things are hard to replace and hard to replicate. And it has been since the 1970s that the countries like the United States have had substantial garment manufacturing. And so these are going to be hard and difficult to move. If there is a trade barrier between China and the United States, it seems that it would the logical step would be to seek out other country of origin for manufacturing. So Vietnam, Bangladesh, the entire continent of Africa are possible candidates. But to consider moving these back to a expensive and industrialized country like the United States, I think would be very difficult in the absence of significant changes to the manufacturing process. And unfortunately today, the technology solutions like 3D printing, additive manufacturing, highly automated manufacturing are all still in their infancy. The role that Hong Kong has been playing with China has always been that it is the gateway to China and the gateway out of China. So we've always been in this middleman trading position in regards to China and the rest of the world. The challenge for Hong Kong going forward is that if Hong Kong becomes just another Chinese city, can we continue to play that role? And will there be continued confidence in the system that is in Hong Kong, in the Hong Kong dollar itself, and in the role, the possible roles that Hong Kong can play? If the trade rules that the U.S. is applying to China are the same trade rules that are applied to Hong Kong, then the Hong Kong lacks its uniqueness in that sense. But having said that, just as the Chinese economy has been changing, even without the trade war, Hong Kong itself has been changing, and our role as the middleman, as the sourcing hub, as the logistics provider, has also been impacted since 2005 with the end of the multi-fiber agreement, and then again in 2008 with the first financial crisis. I think that there are lots of opportunities, certainly around the idea of an intelligent manufacturing, low volume, high velocity manufacturing, the services that Hong Kong can provide by orchestrating supply chains, by handling logistics, including warehousing and distribution of materials and goods, by the fulfillment opportunities, last mile opportunities, and then as a home for new types of innovations, either physically for startups to work in Hong Kong, but also to look at new types of roles as we get into the information age, the building of networks of suppliers, and then the understanding of the demand side of what customers want. All that to say that the roles and the opportunities for Hong Kong probably will be more non-traditional, less so in the labor component of manufacturing, but more so in the finance of supply chain and in the data and intelligence of supply chain and manufacturing.